Good afternoon. This is TJ. Give us your whole name, TJ.
Hi, my name's TJ Squires.
And you grew up in Idaho?
I did, yep. I've been moving progressively westward throughout the state. And so I was born in Idaho Falls. I went to, I guess, pre-middle school, elementary school there, so first to fifth grade. And then we moved to the Sun Valley area, and then I went to middle and high school there. And then for college, I moved to Boise to go to Boise State. I guess I did move to Boise State. I lived in the dorms for a year. And then just as my life has progressed, I've moved westward, and so now I'm in Caldwell, and there's not much Idaho left.
Not much. So, did you go to the School for the Blind at all?
I did not. I've attended a couple of their summer programs and their winter programs, and they were definitely very, very fond memories in my life. But I never did go to the School for the Blind.
They're fond memories because you met other blind people that way?
Mm-hmm. A lot of other blind people, and it was really my first foray into understanding how other blind people did things. And plus, who doesn't want to get away from their parents to go stay up in a lodge for a few days and drink more hot chocolate than you need to?
Did you have the same amount of vision all your life?
Yeah, I have none.
None?
I have light perception. Yeah. I have optic nerve hypoplasia, so I can tell if the lights are on or off, or if the light bounces off something, I can utilize it, but no real usable vision. I couldn't tell you what color a shirt is, or somebody's hair, or make out a face, or anything like that.
Okay, so you are a computer guy, or a nerd, as some people would say, but
not as nerdy as others.
But you earn your living at it, so that makes it a good thing.
It's worked out for me.
At least according to me. So when did you first get acquainted with computers?
It was when I was in sixth grade. I had just moved to the Sun Valley area, and Mr. Z, I think his full was Mr. Zimmerman, I think is what it was. I just know everybody knew him as Mr. Z.
That's good enough.
Came over for some reason, and I'm still not 100% sure why, to install JAWS, which is the most popular screen reader. It was for Windows at the time. It was the only screen reader back then, but it's still around on our family computer. And yeah, I couldn't tell you what point through the year it was, but that's when I first got involved with it. It was definitely, actually, now that I think about it, in the fall.
But you had a family computer. That's the first, because I don't know how many people did.
Yeah, it was still. This was probably back in late 90s, early 2000s. I'm bad at math. Assuming 12th grade was 2006, so sixth grade would be 2000. Call it.
Yeah. So did you jump in excitedly, and what for?
I did, and I started to. Before I had JAWS, I've always been a big video game player, and as years have gone on, that's become a lot more difficult for a number of reasons. But back when video games were much simpler, I would, with my friends in Idaho Falls in elementary school, play Mortal Kombat and a whole bunch of the fighting games. And
without computers, they had their own.
Their own consoles,
like Nintendo and things like that.
Yeah, but I had known that the internet was a thing, and my family was very forward about it. We had the internet, and so I would always ask my dad to look up cheat codes for me. And so when I first got JAWS on that computer, I was like, oh, I can look up my own cheat codes, and that's all it took.
That was enough to get you started.
Yeah, that was it. That's what it took.
So, did you use the computer to play during high school, or did you use it to do some work too?
I was still during high school. I had picked it up you know, because during the middle school when I first started to use it, I kind of got my hands on it and was still learning. There wasn't a lot of support for me. My teacher for the blind and visually impaired, her name was Jan, and she an amazing support. But she wasn't the best with technology, and so it was one of those situations of, well, here's the manual, you figure it out, we don't know either.
She was probably teaching herself
Yeah, and so I had to just figure it out, and a lot of it was just experimentation at that point. And I was lucky enough to be, you know, because the Blaine County School District is, I mean, there's no sugarcoating it. They're wealthy. It's one of the wealthiest school districts, and they definitely saw the writing on the wall, and were willing to support me. And so eventually they got me a laptop so that I could use at school.
Yeah.
And so I did start doing some work on it. You know, things would progress a little bit slowly during middle school, but I did eventually learn. You know, probably my first year in high school is when I really would say that I had mastered the internet and went for broke.
So you could actually look up things on the internet in high school?
Oh yeah.
Uh-huh. And what about word processing? Did you do that in high school?
Yeah, yep, that's when it really started to shift from the Braille light, which was a note taker, to when I started to realize that
Well, the Braille light was computerized.
it was. But it wasn't as sophisticated as like Microsoft Word, and that's at about the point when I started to learn that. And to answer your earlier question, that's when I found out, because I did get curious about video games, and so I would start to do some research on the internet about games for the blind, and that's when my recreational use of it really started. I started to find audio games, which are just games for out of sound. It's exactly what it sounds like, as well as some text-based. They're called MUDs, or multi-user dungeons, and it's where a whole bunch of people get on the same game, and it's all presented through text. And that's where I started to play. And one of the fun facts is one of the games that actually the first one that I found was called Alter Eon. It's still around to this day.
So you'd say the games helped in instructing you on the computer?
Oh, absolutely.
Partly because of motivation and partly because of know-how?
Mostly motivation. You know, I wanted to be included. I wanted to know how to play too, so I figured it out. And then of course that led to developing the skills to being a better screen reader user, that developed the skills to, and then I would take that back to academics. That took it, you know, because then I would have the know-how to figure out how to use,
Sure.
you know, word processors. And
So by the time you graduated from high school, you would say you were a fairly accomplished computer user?
I would, yeah. And that's because, and this wasn't training necessarily for blindness computer skills, but in high school I was a member of the Information Technology Academy, where I started to learn a little bit about computer programming, although I kind of cheated my way through that a little bit. I had met a friend online who helped me with that a great deal, and just started to learn about what made a computer up, so what a hard drive was and how the motherboard worked and why it was important for, you know, the RAM or the computer's memory and things like that. And so I figured that all out. And
there's
by the
nothing
time I
wrong with
graduated.
using sighted assistance if you can get it. That helps you move ahead a lot of times. And sometimes you have to pay for it, and sometimes it's for free. But if you have a friend that wants to do the same things you do, that's perfect. So that's what you were doing. So how did you decide to go to Boise State?
It was cheap. Really?
A state school, yeah.
You know, it was a state school. That's really what it came down to. You know, because I had a friend in California. I had learned how to use, it was called Skype, was the big program that we used back in the day, and I had met some friends on some of the games that I played, and me and one of my friends wanted to go to school together and start a business, which did not turn out the way. But that was in San Diego, and we started looking at cost, and my parents were like, good luck with that. And then I realized that even at that point I knew it was expensive, and so I just didn't resist the path of, I'm pretty good at taking the path of least resistance, and, just went to Boise State and changed my major like 400 times. And
Not quite.
no, but
So
I tried.
what was your major when you finished?
Technical communication.
Technical communication.
And part of it was because of my computer desires. I wanted to, originally I wanted to write, because I did a lot of my learning through the manuals that were available, and some of them weren't that good, and I thought I could do better, so I studied how, and did not pursue that after graduation.
You probably still could if you.
I could.
Except you're making too much money on other things, I bet.
My interest, yeah, my current career is definitely, I didn't know what I didn't know, and didn't know that it was a career opportunity that I could pursue, and it's definitely something I'm happier to do now than.
So what was your first job?
So my very after graduation,
I don't care if you had jobs while you were in college.
So
fine.
my very first job was at the Snow Bunny drive-through in Haley, and I was the guy that put the fry sauce in the fry sauce cups, and it was.
So nothing to do with computers.
Nothing to do with computers.
But experience.
It was experience, and it did relate to computers a little bit, because I started to think, how can I make this more fun? Because it was literally standing there, taking a little cup, pumping two things, putting a lid on it, and putting it in a container for 4 hours a shift. And it was boring. And so I started to do research about, okay, how can I read books? And there were some, like the Bookport, for example, was a device that APH made that they came out with. And so I started doing some research on all of these things, and was able to ask Jan at the ISDB. It's IESDB now, but it was ISDB back then. If they had some of these portable book reading devices, because I would love to use them. And so standing there at the fry sauce counter definitely helped in learning about the portable options of the time.
Well, were you going to read this while you were at work?
Absolutely.
I see. Did other people bring things to read while they were working?
Sometimes, yeah, if they were in the back, that's about the time iPods were taking off. So it was common enough to see people that had, the headphones in.
Well, you could use an iPod, couldn't you? Were they accessible?
They were late, yes and no. They weren't out of the box. There was a firmware that was called Rockbox, and how do you make an iPod accessible, and how do you make it talk, were some of the things that I had, and found that there were ways, and it really at the time took, you had to install. For all intents and purposes, you had to erase the iPod software and put something radically different on it. But yes, there were ways. Unfortunately, we don't have to do a lot of that now.
Yeah. Okay, so then what was your first job that really depended on the computer?
My first job that really depended, I would have to say my internship, and this is kind of how I learned how to. Well, I worked at the Boise State Disability Resource Center for a couple of semesters. In that, kind of used the computer. It was more of they weren't really sure what to do with me. I was responsible for making sure all of their equipment in the library was turned off, and I would help, do some research on, Google or something like that. But I would say my internship for a place called the Idea Shop was really what involved the computer the most. I was tasked to find out how to make online classes accessible.
Was that a Boise State job?
It was.
Uh-huh.
It was also kind of the first foray into accessibility that I had, and this was at the time when school was definitely more getting online, and so by this point, classes were done on the Blackboard software, which is an online e-learning platform.
So did you turn in homework online?
Oh yeah, at this point we did. And
I thought that kind of happened gradually.
it did, and by this point, it was more commonplace now, and this is when professors communicated more by email.
You have to
And
get your grades online.
yep.
I see.
And so,
Were you having to register and pre-register online by then?
oh yeah.
Oh,
Yep, all of it was online. at
I
this point.
think for blind people for a while that was very difficult.
It still is in some areas, yeah.
But you got through all that because you were determined, or
I
you
was,
just
I had to figure it out. And so, determination, curiosity, and a little tenacity. I didn't have a choice. I wanted to, I didn't want to
Well,
be.
in my day, I would have had to hire a reader to do it if I really didn't know how. I would have hired a reader, but I had money to hire a reader. That was going out too, wasn't it? When you were in
It
college?
was, yeah. For the sciences and things, readers and note takers were used. But, and I'm sure that if I really needed one, we could have made that work. But I just had looking back on it, I probably should have, because a lot of these things took me more time and energy than it should have, I think. But it ultimately, I don't regret it, because it ultimately led me to be able to succeed in the career that I have.
Uh-huh. So after you graduated from college, you were looking for work, and tell me how you found your first job.
Yeah, so it was just before I had the same friend I wanted to start a business with, actually. He was working for a company called Aira, and there was an opening for their customer service. And so I was fortunate enough to be able to get the position there, and that was by this point it was fully remote. They were in California, I was here, so everything required computer use at that point.
So tell us about Aira.
Oh boy, this is dredging up the memories. This has been a few
Brief-
years since
Briefly, well, what does it do and what did you do?
Yeah, and so Aira is a visual interpreting service for the blind and visually impaired. And so, long story short, you can place a video call to their trained They call themselves visual interpreters. When I was there, they were called agents. But you can place a call to these people, and they can see through your camera and assist you with things. Back then, I used it a lot more for navigation and things, because they had a pair of smart glasses that went with their service. They don't anymore, and so it's still useful for reading the instructions on a box of macaroni and cheese, for example.
And it's a paid subscription to use Aira.
Yeah.
For the most part, right?
Mm-hmm. And so what I did for them is I did their customer service and a little bit of tech support. I did most of that stuff, and then I transitioned into, I was the person that liaised with their sales department and knew about all of the promotions that were going on, and taught the customer care team that. And I was working on creating their Explorer guide before it was taken over, and before they had suffered some layoffs at the time, and then after I got out of college for a year or so, I was laid off, and reached out to another friend and said, I need a job. Do you have anything at your company that you've told me about before? And what they did was testing websites and mobile apps for accessibility, and fortunately I was able to fake it until I made it, and landed myself there, and that really kick-started my current career, and opened my eyes to a whole new field.
So that was totally outside Aira, right?
Correct.
The same
Yep.
position, okay. And so you had like a promotion with Aira, but then you got laid off anyway?
Yeah.
Okay, and so
Yep.
this next company, are you still with that company?
I'm not. I moved on after about a year or so to a different company, essentially doing the same thing though.
It's evaluation of websites of who?
Of who there's a lot of different clients. I've worked on websites that are e-commerce, so like shopping online, insurance, health, you name the industry, I could probably tell you of a.
So commercial companies mostly?
commercial. I've done some education, some
Education,
private banks,
nonprofits?
Yep. all of
Okay.
it.
Okay, so they come to your company for the purpose of having their website evaluated so that it's accessible?
Yep.
And so, a lot of blind people find that a lot of websites are not accessible. Do those people just not come for an evaluation, or do they not take your recommendations, or?
A little of all of the above. There's a lot of, everybody has a website now, or I should say most people have websites now.
Well,
Most companies
do,
especially
yeah.
have a website, and a lot of individuals even, and sometimes it takes lawyers getting involved for them to realize that people with disabilities want to use their site. Sometimes they're proactive about it, and just for the sheer amount of things on the internet, there are sometimes they just don't know, sometimes they don't care. It could be a variety of different things, and there are some websites that I would classify as not accessible that are usable, and that's one of the intersections of my field that I'm interested in, is the difference between accessibility and usability.
So that means that a blind person with more skill and more creativity could probably make more use of the website than the average person like me.
Yes, that is,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Or, yeah, who have got the time, the effort, the patience, and the motivation, which
And
as
skill.
I'm getting, and skill, and as I'm getting older, the less I want to put up with all of it. But there are people that'll go through some major hoops to make things work, and they'll, write on the forums like, oh, well, if you just click this link and then turn off your screen reader and touch in the middle of the screen and swipe down half an inch, then turn your screen reader back on, swipe 3 pages, click this button, you can totally use it. And it's like,
But that's not really accessible.
yeah, but it's usable.
Well,
Kinda.
I'm forever running into somebody and they'll say, well, if you can give me access to your screen, I'll show you how to do it. And my reaction is, you don't know what you're talking about. Unless you know how to use speech, you're not gonna be able to show me how to use your website.
Yeah, and that's, that is a common, even by people in the accessibility industry, they will assume that that screen readers are just there to make things work,
Yeah.
period. And, I've encountered people that are like, oh yeah, I was using JAWS and I was clicking on the screen with my mouse, and it's like, oh, well.
Okay, why can't you do that?
Because the screen readers use the primary interfaces, using the keyboard, because the mouse is a visual interface. You have a pointer, and so when you move that pointer around onto things happen.
So when you're using the computer, do you use a mouse?
No.
You
Nope.
just turn it off?
I
Unplug it?
don't turn it off, because it's, sometimes it's the trick of the trade is, one of the tricks of the trade is, like, if you have a menu open and you move your mouse out of the way, if you just drag it all the way to the left and the menu closes, that is something that we do take note of. And there's times where I will reach out to a colleague and say, I don't know how to get here, and they will screen share and guide me with the mouse, so I keep it on. But primarily I don't.
So if you screen share with a sighted person, then your mouse has to be there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, sometimes. If JAWS isn't able to get focus on something, like for example, we were testing an application not too long ago that I couldn't log into simply because JAWS wouldn't get focus. But if I clicked on it with a mouse and then logged in, I could continue the testing.
So you wouldn't say you can do everything with the keyboard that you can do with the mouse?
No, you should be able to, but it's not the case, unfortunately. That's why I have a job, though, realistically.
Well, the NFB is working on legislation to make websites accessible, and a lot of people believe that most of them need a lot of work, and you're saying that some of them need more work than others.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, and I mean, that isn't to say that most of them don't need work. I think that it comes down to some of the guidelines that we audit to. We audit to what's called the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines Level AA, just to make it more confusing, which in itself is confusing, and so interpreting the guidelines can be confusing, and so we could do a lot better on making the guidelines more clear. But as of right now, from my last understanding, we would only classify like 2% of the internet is completely accessible.
Completely accessible. So, you would say the average business, do they have the ability in-house to make their websites accessible, or do they really need help from outside?
Oh, that's a loaded question.
Well,
Um,
I didn't mean it to be.
Sometimes, because now we're getting into like website development,
Right.
And so if they, which a lot of, I'm trying to think of the best way to answer this is none, so I'm not just techno babble.
Oh.
So a lot of websites now are designed on a platform. So let's take Shopify as an example. The Shopify platform states we can get you a store in minutes. And which is great. It allows anybody to create a web store. The problem with that is if the regular user decides they're going to use Shopify, some things that Shopify allows you to change, there are some things that may be changed. There are some things that may not, especially with the more third-party components that you get involved with and add to your site. Some third parties will let you control a lot of things, other third parties will not. And so, do they have the capability to change their website? It depends. I would argue yes, because they can change third parties, but there's
because it can change to a different third party.
Yeah, but there is
that
a
wasn't
lot
what
of
I had in mind, no.
there's a lot of interface. There's a lot of reasons as to why not. Ultimately, though, at the end of the day, what we try to teach people is to consider accessibility from the beginning to avoid pitfalls
Sure.
like that.
So what I hear you saying is most companies are going to need a third party to make their websites accessible. Is that, did I read into something you said differently?
More or less, they do need third parties, or they at least need a team within their company that is devoted to accessibility.
Okay.
Or accessibility needs to, and this is what my ultimate hope would be, that accessibility is trained and taught at the college level and is just something that people knew. Because a lot of developers that I've spoken to, they just don't know that it's a thing. They never would have had to.
Okay, I got it. So if you get it involved in training for basic web development and things like that, then we're ahead of the game.
That would be,
Yeah, that would be great.
Because you want to shift it left. You want to have accessibility as early in the process as you can.
Sure. Okay, so I find that very interesting, and I've heard some of it before, but not all. But what would you like to add that I didn't ask?
Don't be afraid of technology. Technology is the future. It always changes.
Other than figuring it out yourself, which you did, but not everybody would feel competent to do, what's the next best way to learn, for a blind person to learn to use a computer?
Get training. There's a lot of assistive technology trainers out there that love this stuff and that figure it out and that can train you. That's one of the skills I wish I had, is to be able to teach it. Because for me, it's just intuitive, and I just, my memory's so bad sometimes I'll forget how to do something and have to go and figure it out again, or walk through the process for it to come back. But there are a lot of people out there that are fantastic at training this stuff.
But there are things written that don't make sense to me. But I
There's
need
things that
some-
are written that don't make sense to me too.
I mean, to teach blind people how to do this.
Yeah.
Various steps, various things.
Today I would say, well, I hesitate to say this because it can steer you just as wrong, but AI could be important in learning.
Oh, if you know how to
But-
use it.
Yeah, well, that and AI will still make things up, and so it could steer you. Maybe it's not a good idea, actually. Not until you know what you know. Not until you.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it's not a good idea.
I'd be
Yeah.
afraid of it.
Although AI is great for lots of things, but
Okay, well, rather than getting into different kinds of computers, which I don't think we'll try to do right now, is there anything else that you think is, will make sense to the layperson, as you say, that isn't totally computer babble?
I guess I would say that if you have a blind person in your life, technology will be their best friend at this point.
If they learn it.
If they learn it, and they
So
should
start young and keep
start
working
young
on
and
it.
keep working on it. Or, if there's a need, I find that if there's a need, that's the best way that I could tell you to figure out how to solve that need. Like for me, a lot of needs, my in-laws live with us now, but a lot of the needs for technology have come, I want to
Do X.
do X. How can I accomplish that without getting another person involved?
Yeah. Well, now you say there are a lot of assistive technology trainers. Are most of them online?
I believe, like in our local area, we have the, and I'm going to be put on the spot, I don't remember what it stands for, but the ATC, Assistive
Oh, the
Training Center?
But that's only for center students.
Yeah.
And so if you're either working full-time or not there yet, the commission has very limited services.
Yeah, that's true. And that's just something I know, I'm sure you could find training. And I hesitate to say this, but just thinking about it from my perspective, if you're working full time, you have to have basic computer literacy these days, I think.
But if you want to move, if a promotion requires a higher level of computer use, and you don't think you can figure it out for yourself, how would you go about looking for somebody to help?
I would just put it into a group. What I would do is I would start looking for blindness organizations or gatherings of blind people, which would probably lead me to the NFB, which may lead me to the NFB affiliate of my state, which may lead me to the president, who hopefully knows somebody that knows somebody that knows somebody. I think it would. It's a good question. A part of me wants to say I think it would be like finding a plumber. You would just reach out and look on the internet for people that are in that
Well, except there are more
ecosystem.
plumbers.
Except that, yeah, there's way more
Locally.
plumbers. But at the same time, I feel like it could be quite difficult to find somebody, and that's why I think that having a gathering of blind people that you belong to is important. Is because then you'll at least have a resource, because then you'll know somebody that knows somebody that knows me.
The computer, well, except you don't have time to do a lot of training, and you say you wouldn't feel good about doing it anyway. You've got the skill. But there is a computer division in the NFB, but my sense is that they are really working on developing their own careers, not training new people.
Mm-hmm. But we might know some, like for example, I know an assistive technology trainer, and I don't know, he's based out of Michigan, and I know that he has done some training with people on the side. I don't know if he is able to do it outside of his state, but I think that, and if it was based on the need, I think that it's more likely we could find something, you know, if somebody was like, hey, I need to know how to use Microsoft Outlook to, you know, to send emails or to interface with my calendar. That's something I use so often, I could probably teach you that. But if you're like, hey, I need somebody to train me how to, you know, how to use Google Sheets with a screen reader, that's something I could figure out if I had to, but I couldn't teach you that because it wasn't something that I used regularly.
Yeah, and because they change it often.
Oh, yeah, there's the problem, yeah.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate your sharing your knowledge and experience, because I think there'll be people watching YouTube that find this very interesting.
I hope so.
I don't know if you want to share how to get hold of you, but you might get more contacts than you want. But they can always go through the YouTube
Yeah,
channel.
I do look at. I'm privileged enough to have access to the YouTube, so I do look at the YouTube comments, and I'll provided I don't forget, pay attention to comments on this video. I mean, because ultimately my goal in life is to make it so that it's easier for people that come after me to do the things that I've done. So, you know, I would hate, because I can remember several times in college sitting up frustrated to tears because I didn't know how to use MathLab.
Yeah.
And I needed, you know, and of course, like the college students do, I needed it by tomorrow. So, you know, or the reason that I'm so invested in my career is because I want somebody to be able to go to a mom and pop bakery and order their wife's favorite pastries too. And so I'm really passionate about making
But you have
sure
to do
people,
online.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, you can still call a lot of places, but you should have the ability to order them online like anybody else. And that's something I'm really passionate about, is making sure that there is an avenue for people to be able to do those things. And some people have the ability to advocate, you know, in Washington with their senators, and my chosen way of trying to help is to make sure that people can access the technology they want.
Got it. All right, well, thank you very much.
Absolutely.